Come on!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and your next door neighbour, and their next door neighbour, and their next door neighbour as well. I went to see the movie Norman.
Why do I get the feeling that nothing you tell me is real?
Let's just say, get ready for a big surprise.
Which has actually a much longer, more interesting title, and the confidence of the director to give it a title like that says something about the actual movie. It is certainly not a title that rolls off the tongue, but it is a very good title, and it is in a similar fashion to say the way Shakespeare opened some of his plays like Romeo and Juliet, two star-crossed lovers take their life. He gives away the end at the beginning. Well, it shows a lot of confidence because it's still like, well, this is the story, get ready for it. And Norman, the film, does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a very interesting movie. First of all, I will say, Richard Gere is really good in it. I really liked to see Richard Gere. I had a sort of warm, nostalgic feeling. Seems like I haven't seen that guy forever. It's like, to me, he hasn't appeared in a movie since American Gigolo or something. It's like, where the hell has that guy been? He's been off the map for far too long. I know he's done quite a few movies now and then, but he certainly seems to be having something of a resurgence in the present day. But this is not your average Hollywood cliche claptrap. He's obviously trying to sink his teeth into something a little bit more nuanced and interesting. Now, the story is essentially about a guy who's a bit of a nobody, and he wants to be a somebody, and he's using people who are somebody to try and elevate himself. He's befriending people in high places, pretending that he too is already in high places. Now, that's all I need to say about the movie. That's kind of all it's about. But what I really like about it is that initially he comes across as something of a bit of a stalker, and also a guy who's trying to leech off of people. And that is obviously not something that is perceived as positive. And yet, as the film unravels, what I like about it is that there is enough nuance and depth and investigation into this character that it is not so one-dimensional as that. It does leave you questioning, well, wait a minute, why shouldn't he have a chance to be on a higher rung, a higher step than he actually is? Why is he inferior to these people who he looks up to, admires and aspires to? He does them favours to get his foot in the door of power, but he does not seem to do it in any kind of malicious way. There is no malice to him. And it makes you think that, you know, there are a lot of people in the world who are way, way down and would like to be way, way up. And some of them deserve to be up in higher positions. Many of the people who are in high positions don't deserve those positions and deserve to be low. That being said, Norman, I can't say that he necessarily deserves to be anywhere other than where he actually is, but he is an interesting enough person that you do not think this is a bad guy. You just kind of think, well, let it unravel. If you watch it, you will see for yourself. I would say that because it's so unusual and interesting, and I kind of sat there thinking, this is strange. I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it, which in its own way kind of makes it worth watching just for that. But I think that one thing to its credit is that because it is quite unique, I could almost imagine this becoming quite an underground success, to the point where if you ever meet anybody like that character, somebody trying to leech off of you in some way, I can imagine it being a coined phrase that people are like, oh, he's like a Norman. You're like that guy Norman from the movie Norman, trying to get power and support off of me. You're trying to put across a facade of yourself that is not real. You are trying to embellish the truth. You are trying to make people think that you are a success when you're not. You are essentially trying to stand upon the backs of people in higher positions of power than you are. And I can just imagine people saying, oh, that person's like a Norman. I mean, I've met people like that, and being a human being, I'm without question, I found myself in positions like that, where there is a celebrity in the room, and I'm kind of thinking, now how can I maybe get something off of this person? For example, I met Quentin Tarantino once. I wasn't subtle about the fact that I wanted to use his aid to remedy my obscurity. I handed him a film script that I'd written and said, hey, Quentin, read this. And he was wonderful, actually. He was a lovely, lovely guy, and we chatted for some time about movies and filmmaking, and I have nothing but positive things to say about him. But my point is even I've been in those situations where I've thought, can I get, some support out of this person who's in a position that I'd like to be in? So Norman is relatable in that regard. He's almost penned in the beginning as this guy who's a bit of a leech, but ultimately, look, he's human, and that's what's successful about the film. Now, it's not perfect. The cinematography is good. It's not super special. The pace isn't perfect, but it's very compelling. It's a very interesting movie, a very unique movie, and I think if you were interested and you wanted to give it a watch, I don't think that you would regret it. At least you would know within 10 minutes if you'd regret it, because the tone of the beginning is the tone of the whole film.
I don't want to look like I'm asking him for a favor.
Can I say that we're related? Can I say that I'm your uncle?
No.
So maybe you can watch it with that in mind. It doesn't really change gears. See what I did there? Richard Gere doesn't change gears. To be perfectly honest, I felt like it reminded me of like a 70s paperback novel. It had that kind of feeling, back in a time when storytellers and filmmakers were not trying to tell outlandish, lavish, spectacle stories. Back in the 70s, films were much more diverse. Like, the storytellers and writers didn't know what would be a big hit, and they didn't seem to care as much. They were just sort of like, I've got an idea for a story, I'm going to tell it. And then when Jaws and Star Wars came out, everything changed. Everything became big. Everything became a hero story. Everything became almost like comic book. And I love all of that stuff, but it's also a shame to not have both. It would be nice to have both. The spectacles and the simpler, more human stories, let's say. And this feels like one of them. It feels like a bit of a 70s movie. It doesn't have the grit or the warmth of the film that you would get in a 70s movie. Feels much more modern to look at, but definitely has a bit of a 70s vibe in its storytelling style.
This is my private home. Now, you can't just walk in it and sit at my table.
Could I introduce you to him sometime? You know who he is, right?
Anyway, that's Norman. I've said enough. I've said too much. I've rambled and rambled and rambled, and now I'm going to leave. I'm going to go, and I'm going to see you again soon. Take care of yourselves. Ta-da!